Welcome to the Metamorphosis Show, the show created to help you transform the way you think, eat, and move. And today's episode is all about abdominals. How to get them, how to keep them. All right? I'm going to briefly talk about the different parts of the abs. Sorry, I'm holding the mic today because I'm shamelessly shirtless, but if there's a time to be shirtless on the Metamorphosis Show, it's during the abs episode. It would be silly for me to tell you about this if I couldn't demonstrate. So, I'll turn the camera up a little bit. So here we have the different parts of the abs, okay? These are the rectus abdominis, right? That's the little bricks across the front. And underneath, you have the transverse abdominis. These are intercostals. And these guys right here are called serratus. So, the bottom down here is obliques. Okay, so everybody has these. Everybody has all of these muscles. And hi, Brenda and Don. Thanks for joining. Appreciate you being here. So everybody has all these abdominal muscles. They're just either super atrophied or buried under a few layers. So how do you get these? How do you make them look like they're standing out? There's a bunch of different ways, and I'm going to show you the most effective that I know of after many, many years. I am almost 40, and these abs, there's really not that many secrets, but I'll tell you all of them. And if you have any questions about any of this stuff, go ahead and post them up. And if you want a program that you can do that's designed around these particular exercises, I will post up a link for that as well. So there are a few things about the abs that I need to talk about before I demonstrate the exercises. First, man, let me tilt that down. It's kind of hard to see. This is gonna be my little ab demonstration spot. So, and sorry about the sound. Hopefully it sounds good. I do have to hold this thing, which isn't ideal. So these, I'm sure you've heard it before, abs are made in the kitchen, yes. I'm going to show you a bunch of really cool exercises, but and they'll range from, exercises for people with injuries all the way up to if you want to have world-class core strength. But that doesn't change the fact that you need to really look at what you eat. You can't ever see what's underneath all that stuff unless you are controlling what you eat. And for the most part, I gotta say, the thing that has been the easiest for me to maintain a very lean physique is keeping the carbs very, very low. And I know that's not great for everyone, and if you're trying to get super huge, that's not gonna work for you. You kind of need the insulin spikes and the help from the IGF-1 and hormonal factors that I don't understand well enough to talk about. But to get super lean, I've seen the low carb approach work over and over again. Right now I'm in a modified ketogenic diet, and that just means that I get the majority of my calories from fats rather than protein or carbs. So now that you know that you can't have your muscles stand out unless you get rid of the fat, let's talk about the movements. The first one I want to show you is the McGill crunch. And this is, let me move the camera down a little bit. This was created, no tortillas. Well, you can have them maybe, once a week or so. But every day, probably not, Brenda. Nice try. I love them too. I know there are a couple things but see, I don't really deny myself anything either. I just don't do it every single day. And I think that's the key is I think abstinence only obviously doesn't work. We've seen that over and over, but neither does, an everyday overload of carbohydrates. No one looks lean who does that unless, they have a special body. Most of us can't get away with that. So the first one is a McGill crunch. This was developed by Stuart McGill, and this is for primarily if you have disc issues like I do. If your back's messed up in any way, this is going to be the least, there'll be the least compression on your spine, okay? So one leg's extended, my chin's tucked, my hands, usually both hands would be under the small of your back, but I'm gonna keep the microphone here. And I'm just going to make a very short range of motion. Just enough so that I'm squeezing all this musculature in here, okay? It's a very short tilt, kind of like a little bit of a curl. You think about, instead of coming forward as much, you want to think about maybe your forehead trying to go through the ceiling or the sky or whatever it is above you. So you're going to come up. It's just a very short range of motion. Now, I've seen McGill do a hold in this position, and I think I've seen other people do repetitions. You know, do what works for you. Again, this is always going to be something that will be unique to your physiology. So if these movements hurt your back or hurt something, don't do them. So it's come up, squeeze everything, and back down. And you can experiment. That's called the McGill crunch. I've used it with people with injuries for a really long time. I think it's super effective for just starting to feel all the muscles in your midsection. But as something that's going to make your abs stand out, not so much. Like, you can get stronger that way, which is great when you're coming back from an injury. But as you move up, there are a couple others I like instead. And I'm going to drop the bomb on you when I stand up and push the camera back a little bit. I think there are movements that are far superior to what I'm showing you right now that don't involve direct ab work. And you may have seen this before if you have any experience in the strength and conditioning community, but it's usually said that if you can, deadlift a decent amount or squat a decent amount, you get tons of work in your trunk muscles. I definitely found that to be the case when I was squatting and deadlifting quite a bit. And now that I don't, I have found that the pull-up is probably the single most important exercise you can do to have really prominent and strong and healthy abdominal muscles and muscles in your midsection completely. Sorry, it's really windy. Your lower back will benefit as well. Everything benefits from pull-ups except maybe your elbows. So that really depends on you. The next thing I'm going to show you is the planks. You guys know about the planks, but what I want you to see is the hollow hold. So I'm going to show you real quick with my other hand down. What I'm going to do is push out across my shoulders and bring my butt down, tuck my hips in, and this will create a lot of tension in my midsection, but we'll also be strengthening a bunch of other body parts as well. So check this out. I'm going to speak a little louder. I hope you can still hear me. So this is a normal plank that maybe you've seen before. Not great. What we want to do is push out across the shoulders, tuck the hips down, right? And now I'm making sort of like an arch position. Arch is wrong. It's like a hollow position, like a hollow body. This is what this is referred to in gymnastics. So again, it's not here. I'm pushing out across my shoulders, tucking my hips down, and everything in my midsection is squeezed so hard. All these muscles here are just going like that when you do. Sorry, all these muscles in your midsection are doing this when you go into the hollow body position. Now you can do stuff like bring your knees, to your elbows across your body from this hollow position, right? I can cross my knee here and cross my knee there. You can do that, but in all honesty, you should be working pull-ups instead. And that will probably be the refrain after every one of these exercises, because once you get beyond the McGill crunch, which I showed you earlier, I mean, if you can hang at all, you can bring your knees up. If you can do any sort of just eccentric pull-up, you will be squeezing all this and be getting ab workout all the time. And I think that's a huge misconception. It's like, well, what can you show? I run into this all the time, or used to, with personal training clients. It's like, okay, great, Thomas, now what can you show me for my abs? And I'm like, well, all the stuff that I've given you to do will train your abs indirectly or directly. But people want to feel like they're doing ab work, right? So here's what you do for your abs. You stop eating carbohydrates and you start learning to do pull-ups. That's the fastest way to get visible abs. So we did the McGill crunch. We did the hollow body plank. I know. V-sits and L-sits. Not V-sits. I'm not going to do that because I can't do that. L-sits I will, and I'll show you compression holds. These are devastatingly difficult, and you will see right now. So the whole point of this is to try and bring your legs up while keeping your upper body forward, okay? Way harder than it sounds. So right now, to start off, here's the easiest version. I'm going to put this microphone down and my hands will go right next to my hips, and I'm going to bring both feet off the ground with toes pointed. Looks like this. Hands by the hips, toes come up. Lean forward. You probably can't see, but everything has to be squeezed in order to pull that off. The further forward your hands are, right, the more I creep them up towards my knees and beyond, the harder this compression gets. Because if you're inflexible like I am, which doesn't mean I'm inflexible, it just means I haven't trained enough for flexibility, right? We aren't all naturally one way or the other to certain degrees, but everything can be trained. I'm going to creep my hands forward and you'll see how much harder this is. I'll do it again from the hips, then I'll do it mid-thigh, then I'll do it past my knees, and you'll see how much more difficult this becomes. Here's number one. Right? Hands a little bit closer, lean forward. There's number two. And now I'm going to go past my knees. That's number three. And so with the compression holds, you'll feel this, man, in the top of your quads like crazy, but also in your midsection. And you're going to try and do these for time. So maybe at the beginning, you can only do, 5 seconds. That's cool. You want to build up to the point where you're able to do, 30 seconds, 45 seconds. And at that point, what will you do? Well, you'll probably start doing pull-ups a lot better than you can now. So the compression, you can do it with both feet together, and you can also do a straddle compression. And that is basically the same thing. I'll demonstrate all three positions again, but in the straddle. So first I start with my hands closest to my body. Oh my God, that third one. I think I nearly had a heart attack. So those are compression holds. And those things work wonders not only for your midsection strength, but also the top of your quads, man. Those things, you have to squeeze like crazy just to get those legs off the ground. And if you don't believe me about those movements, go ahead and sit on the floor and try that. And you might be able to have your hands right next to your hips and go, man, this is easy, Tom, this is crazy. But the closer to your knees you bring your hands, oh man, that gets hard fast. So the other one I'm going to do off the floor, and then we'll get up and do some stuff on the rings and be done and wrap this up. The other one off the floor is the L-sit. Now, if you haven't been humbled recently, this is a great way to do it. Everyone needs a little humility on a Friday going into the weekend. And the L-sit is that. It has been excruciatingly difficult for me, and I will do my best to give you a decent demonstration. But here's how it starts out with you having both feet on the ground and basically just lifting your butt up with your hands right by your hips, right? I'll show you that real fast. So my hands are by my butt. I lift my butt off the ground and I hold that tucked position, squeezing my abs, okay? Now to make that more challenging, you can then take one leg off. And then to make it even more challenging, you can take the other foot off. And me, I have really tight hamstrings and hip flexors, so I'm not going to be able to get the full extension, but your goal in an L-sit is to have straight legs and your butt off the ground. So I'm going to show you the three variations real quick. Here we go. Well, there are many variations, but I'm going to do 2 legs, 1 leg, and then just an L-sit. Here's 2, here's 1, and here's both. So that is just excruciating for me, and right now I think I'm up to about 40 seconds or so. And according to my friend Antranik, you want to be able to do a minute, 1 full minute in an L-sit and that will really put you on the path to a lot more strength and your ultimate goal, which is to, have visible abs, if that is indeed one of your goals. If it's not, I hope you're learning something interesting anyway. So those are the things that you can do off the ground. Now I want to move to the rings and show you stuff that I think will really start to exponentially improve your entire midsection front to back in the pull-up range. So if you're just joining us, please go back and watch the beginning where we talk about all the different carbs. Hey, Kafir, thanks for joining. Yeah, I will talk a bit more about carbs. First, I'm going to put this back so that you can see the rings. Yeah? So, let's see. Sorry for the... Hey, Tyler. Long time no chat, girl. Okay, so the rings. Unfortunately, I have this goofy microphone in my hand. Let me see if I can make it work like this. So I will talk more about the nutrition stuff at the very end, but first I want to just keep going on this, on the exercise track. So we did all this stuff on the floor, and now to make things a little bit more challenging if you're ready to up your abdominal game, the first is just a knee raise. Let's say you haven't really progressed to pull-ups yet, but a knee raise is just your speed. So let's check that out. What does that look like? Sorry, I'm going to readjust. Pretty straightforward, right? You're going from a full extension. Maybe I just move this camera back. You're going from a full extension and bringing your knees up as high as you can. And do this slowly, okay? I can't emphasize enough how important it is to do abdominal work more slowly than you probably are. I've been guilty of it in the past myself. And it's like, oh, well, I can get way more repetitions in if I just crank these things faster. But if your goal is to just train this particular part and not flail around in a kipping motion, that should be your goal, is doing things strictly, unless you're training CrossFit, do them slow. So first we have the knee raise, right? And that was just bringing your knees to your chest or higher, squeezing at the top and coming down. The next is a tuck front lever, which, man, again, I'm still working on this. Your goal is to get your back parallel to the ground with your knees as close to your chest as you can to stay nice and tight. Well, it'll be easier the closer your knees are to your chest. Ultimately, you want to be able to extend your legs completely parallel to the ground, which, I'm not even close to that yet. And my friend Nanchanik told me that being taller makes it harder. So I'm sticking with that story, not just that I'm super weak. So I'm going to show you the tuck hold real fast. Sorry about the butt shot, but the whole goal of that is to be parallel to the ground. And I find that incredibly hard. Again, you're trying to do that for time. But now I'm going to show you what I think are the most crucial aspects of making this strong. And that is, my friends, pull-ups. I'll show you the hollow body position, and then I'll show you the L-sit. And beyond that, I've already done a pulling video, so if you want to go back and look at the pull-ups, all about pull-up stuff, you could check that out. But I think these have probably had the biggest impact on my abdominal strength. 2 movements. The first is the hollow body pull, and that's with my legs out in front of me, with my toes pointed. My body's in sort of like a modified C position. Check this out. And you'll be able to see as I do this how hard my abdominals are working. Okay, that's one. Now the second one I'm going to do is the L-sit pull-up, and that is done a couple of different ways. The easiest version, of course, is with your knees tucked. I hope you could see, man. The light's sort of blown out in the back. The easiest version's with the knees tucked. The hard version is with your legs straight out. Man, sorry guys. Sorry for the camera movement. But I just want you to be able to see. Okay, so first I'm going to do the knees tucked. Again, getting a ton of stimulation. Lighten up, you screen. Man, it's brutal. What about rotator cuff issues? Great question, Brenda. Hold on, let me. I've turned my screen dark. Oh, there we go. Well, if you mean in regards to pulling, then yeah, you need to sort those out before you can do this. But really, you can, if you can't even hang because of your rotator cuff issues, then you really need to address that first. And I can at least point you in the right direction in that regard. But man, I gotta tell you, I've seen over and over people heal themselves with hanging movements. But that is a subject for a different episode, and I think I will do an entire episode on that. Thank you, Brenda. Okay, so this is the last abdominal exercise. L-sit pull-ups. Again, you'll see how hard my abs are working. Oh, sweet baby Jane. Okay, so that is the abdominal story, at least as far as the exercises go. Kafir asked me to talk a little bit more about carbohydrates, and I will. Maybe I'll change up this background so you can see, man, that is just being blown out like crazy. Okay, so Kafir, hope you're still watching. As far as the carbohydrates go, you have to experiment. You have to figure out what works best for you. If you want to achieve a certain look, that is going to be so highly dependent on what you eat rather than what you're doing, with certain limitations. And what I mean by that is, if you want to look like a bodybuilder, you have to do a ton of work for years in order to look that way. And that fullness that you see is generally because of carbohydrates, right? As sort of skinny and flat as I look right now, it's because I'm not holding a lot of water and I don't eat a lot of carbohydrates. So you kind of got to figure out what look you want, how you want to perform, and then train and eat accordingly. Because you can't serve two masters, as they say, right? You can't get huge and be full looking and also be, super lean at the same time, unless you want to put in years of work or you want to do drugs. That's just pretty much the way I've seen it over years and years and years. Guys are either super lean or they're super full and big, but rarely do you see, there are genetic anomalies for sure, but I would like to know what are you interested in specifically about carbohydrates? What do you need to know? I'll tell you as much as I can. For me, I used to do a ton of sweet potato and oats and rice. The typical good carb choices that everyone does. And lately I've taken it out altogether. The most carbohydrates I have now probably are in the form of wine. And maybe once a week I have the things like Brenda was talking about, like tortillas or, the very rare loaf of French bread. I can't not love it, guys. It's so delicious. A bottle of wine, a bunch of cheese, maybe some cured meats, and a nice loaf of bread. That's good eating. But I really do that rarely because A, it doesn't make me feel good, I mean, in the moment it does, but not after. And then B, I can tell a difference in my physique. Gluten tends to make me hold water. And that's not the same for everyone. And there's not like it's all evil. But for me, that's the case. And what I was saying to Kafir earlier is you have to decide what works best for you. So, okay, sorry, Kafir, now I can see. Hey, Johnny Walter, thanks for joining. So Kafir says, going for lean, eating very low carbs, brown rice, still can't get abs. Okay, so what do you think is very low carbs, man? Because a lot of people think they're going low carb and they can't see, vascularity, and a lot of that's genetic, sure, but you should be able to get to a pretty good place if you're counting your macronutrients, if you're tracking this in any way. But for me, very low carbs means less now than it did when I was 25, I'm 38 now, so very low carbs for me is like under 20 grams a day, which I can't even imagine having, that few carbs when I was 25. I would start to lose size, right? But I just feel so much better that way. And I think that changes. That's completely liquid, depending on how old you are and what you can get away with at the time, and depending on your training. But I don't personally like to out-train a diet, a bad diet, that is. So I would hate to eat onion rings and cheeseburgers like I used to, and then feel like I needed to work harder for that. Now I have other things to do. I can't spend all my time training, so I would much rather eat what is relatively clean for me and stay in a certain shape. So again, you really have to figure out what works for you and do some experimenting. Go super low carb for a week. Take some pictures. Look at how your body changes. Assess how you feel. How's your performance? And then kind of go off there, adjust either way. Ultimately, you want to be in a place where you're doing it automatically, auto-regulation. But you can't do that if you don't know what works for you, So you got to find the foods. You have to find a general routine that is sustainable, and then go from there. I hope that answers that question a little bit better. Johnny, yes, sir. Let's do that. You're always welcome at the beach. Thank you, Brenda. It's less work than you might think, actually. I really only strength train 3 days a week at this point. But really keeping the carbohydrates low has been a big deal for me and super sustainable. I guess I was cutting my head off. But unless there are any other pressing questions, I am going to wrap this up. Thank you for watching. Actually, if you want to stick around or keep asking questions specifically about abdominals and the subject matter for today, just post them underneath and I will make sure that I get to them. If you enjoyed this episode, please head over to the sponsor, 30minuteadvantage.com. Check out the courses available there so that you can change the way you think, eat, and move with cold water therapy, farm-to-table nutrition, 30-minute workouts, and meditation. Thanks for watching, and until next time, you have so much power. Use it wisely.